The Young and the Restless next 2 weeks, March 9th to 20th, 2026. The fog rolled off Lake Michigan in thick, suffocating waves, wrapping the marina in a shroud of gray that dampened the sounds of the city behind them. Billy Abbott stood on the edge of the pier, his knuckles white as he gripped the cold metal railing. Beside him, Kyle paced like a caged animal, his breath hitching in the frigid air, while Diane Jenkins stood perfectly still, her eyes scanning the rows of bobbing vessels with a terrifying intensity. "This is the place," Billy said, his voice rough with the exhaustion of the last 48 hours. The tip was specific. Slip 42. The Lorelei. "It doesn't make sense," Kyle snapped, spinning around to face his uncle. "Why would Dad be here? He hates boats this time of year. It's freezing, and why would he come alone without telling anyone?" "We don't know that he came here alone, Kyle," Diane said softly, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her composure. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, the wind ripping strands of hair across her face. "If someone took him, if this is a drop-off point." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The silence between them was filled with the unspoken horror that had consumed the Abbott family since Jack had vanished 2 days ago. No ransom note, no calls, just a void where the patriarch of their family used to be. Then, the text message to Billy's burner phone, an anonymous string of coordinates and a name. "Let's go," Billy commanded, stepping onto the wooden dock. The planks creaked ominously under his boots. They moved as a unit, driven by a desperate, fragile hope. The marina was deserted, the season too early for the leisure crowd. The only sounds were the rhythmic clinking of the halyards against mast and the sloshing of dark water against the hulls. When they reached Slip 42, the boat was there. The Lorelei was a sleek, mid-sized cruiser, its white fiberglass hull gleaming dully in the mist. It looked abandoned, bobbing listlessly in the chop. "Jack!" Diane screamed, her voice cracking as she rushed toward the gangplank. "Jack, are you there?" There was no answer, only the wind howling through the rigging of a neighboring sailboat. Billy hoarded first, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had a sickening feeling in his gut, a familiarity with disaster that he had tried so hard to outrun. He pushed open the cabin door, which swung inward with an agonizing creak. "Dad?" Kyle pushed past Billy, stumbling down a few steps into the main cabin. The interior was dim, lit only by the gray light filtering through the portholes. It smelled of stale air and diesel fuel. Kyle scanned the room frantically, overturning cushions, ripping open cabinets. "He has to be here," Kyle muttered, panic rising in his throat. "They said he was here." "Look," Diane whispered. She was standing by a table, bolted to the floor near the galley. Resting on the seat was a folded suit jacket, navy blue Italian wool. Kyle froze. He reached out, his fingers trembling as he touched the fabric. He lifted it, burying his face in the collar. "It's his," he choked out. "It smells like his cologne. Sandalwood and... it's him." Billy moved to the table. Beside where the jacket had lain, there was a watch, Jack's vintage Patek Philippe, the one he wore for luck during board meetings, and his wallet, lying open. His credit cards were still inside. The cash was untouched. "He wouldn't leave these here," Billy said, the blood draining from his face. "He never takes that watch off. Not unless he was forced to." Diane finished, her eyes wide with horror. She spun around, scanning the empty corners of the cabin as if the shadows might materialize into her husband. "Jack! Jack!" The three of them tore the boat apart. They checked the tiny sleeping quarters, the head, the engine room. They threw open storage lockers and peered into the blige. Nothing. The boat was empty. It was a stage set, dressed with the artifacts of a man's life but devoid of the man himself. Kyle collapsed onto the bench seat, clutching his father's jacket to his chest. "He's gone," he whispered, the fight draining out of him. "He was here, now he's... God, Billy, where is he?" Billy didn't answer. He was staring at the wallet on the table. It felt wrong. It felt too staged. The neat fold of the jacket, the prominent display of the watch. It wasn't a struggle. It was a message. "We need to call the police," Diane said, her voice rising in hysteria. "We need to get to Harbor Patrol. We need divers." "No." A voice cut through the air, deep and distinct, coming from the dock above them. Billy's head snapped up. He knew that voice. It was a sound that haunted the Abbott family for decades, a baritone rumble that signaled power, control, and inevitable destruction. He scrambled up the stairs to the deck, Kyle and Diane close behind him. The quiet evening that Lauren Fenmore and Michael Baldwin had hoped for quickly turned into something far more serious than either of them expected. They had been sitting together in the living room, surrounded by the familiar comfort of their home, discussing an opportunity that had recently been placed in front of them. The offer was significant, one that could influence not only their professional lives, but also the direction of their future together. Lauren listened carefully, while Michael analyzed the details with the cautious mindset that had always defined him as a lawyer. The proposal promised influence and financial benefits. but it also carried complicated implications that could pull them deeper into the unpredictable politics of Genoa City. Lauren understood that decisions in their world were rarely simple. Every alliance, every contract, every promise came with hidden consequences. Michael, ever the strategist, laid out the advantages in measured terms. He believed the offer could strengthen their position and open doors that had been closed to them for years. Yet even he admitted that the situation demanded caution. Genoa City had always been a battlefield for powerful families, and becoming entangled in the ambitions of the wrong person could create enemies that lasted a lifetime. Lauren listened with quiet concentration, weighing every possibility. She had spent enough years watching the endless rivalries between the Newmans, the Abbotts, and other influential players to understand that the smallest decision could ripple outward into chaos. Still, she believed that careful planning might allow them to benefit from the opportunity without sacrificing their stability. Their conversation, however, never reached a final conclusion. The calm atmosphere shattered when Lauren's phone vibrated sharply on the table. At first she assumed it was another business message or a routine call, but the moment she glanced at the screen, the color drained from her face. The message came from the Abbott family, and its urgency was unmistakable. Michael noticed the sudden change in her expression and immediately sensed that something had gone terribly wrong. When Lauren read the message aloud, the room seemed to grow colder with every word. The shocking news was simple yet devastating. Jack Abbott had disappeared, and there were strong indications that Patty Williams might be involved. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Jack's name carried enormous weight in Genoa City, not just as a powerful businessman, but as a central figure in the complicated web of alliances and rivalries that defined the city's social structure. Lauren felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. She had seen countless conflicts unfold over the years, but the idea that Jack might actually be held somewhere by Patty was almost unimaginable. Yet the more she thought about it, the more she recognized how dangerous the situation truly was. Patty's history of emotional instability and obsessive behavior made her capable of actions that most people would never even consider. Lauren's mind quickly jumped to the larger implications. She had watched the rivalry between the Abbott and Newman families escalate again and again, each side pushing the other closer to the edge. This new crisis felt like the inevitable result of those long-standing power struggles. In Genoa City, grudges rarely disappeared. They evolved, growing stronger with time until they eventually exploded in ways no one could predict. Lauren realized that Jack's disappearance might not simply be an isolated act of revenge. It could be another move in a much larger conflict that had been building quietly behind the scenes. Michael tried to maintain the calm professionalism that had always helped him navigate crises, but even he could not completely hide his concern. As a lawyer, he had handled many dangerous situations, yet this one felt unusually personal. Jack was not just another powerful client or distant acquaintance. He was part of the intricate network of relationships that had shaped their lives for years. Michael understood that if Patty truly believed she had been wronged by Jack, the situation could escalate unpredictably. Patty did not operate according to normal rules. Her actions were often driven by emotion rather than logic, and that made her incredibly dangerous. Without wasting another moment, Michael began contacting people who might have more information. The first names that came to mind were Diane Jenkins and Kyle Abbott, the two individuals who were likely feeling the full weight of Jack's disappearance. Lauren watched anxiously as Michael spoke on the phone, his voice calm but urgent as he asked questions and tried to piece together the limited details they had. From what he could gather, Diane and Kyle had already begun searching for clues, following every lead that might point to Jack's location. The fear in Diane's voice was impossible to ignore, and Kyle sounded equally determined to uncover the truth. Lauren realized in that moment that this situation was no longer something they could observe from a distance. The Abbotts were not just another powerful family caught in a crisis. They were people who had shared decades of history with her and Michael, people whose lives had intersected with theirs in countless ways. Standing aside while they faced a potential tragedy would feel like a betrayal of that history. The gravity of the situation made the earlier conversation about business offers suddenly seem insignificant by comparison. As Michael ended the call, he looked at Lauren with a seriousness that needed no explanation. The decision was already forming between them without the need for lengthy discussion. They both understood that crises like this required allies who were willing to act quickly and decisively. Michael began considering what legal and strategic resources he could use to help locate Jack or pressure the right authorities into action. Lauren, meanwhile, thought about the personal connections she might use to gather information or offer support to Diane and Kyle during the search. The urgency of the moment also forced Lauren to reconsider the proposal they had been discussing earlier that evening. Only minutes before, the offer had seemed important enough to shape their future. Now it felt trivial compared to the immediate threat facing someone they cared about. Lauren realized that opportunities could always be revisited later, but moments like this, when family and loyalty were tested, could not be ignored. Michael shared the same conclusion. the calculated lawyer who had spent years analyzing risks and benefits, now spoke with quiet certainty. Some battles were not about profit or strategy. They were about protecting the people who mattered most. If Jack was truly trapped in Patty's dangerous game, then the entire Abbott family might soon face consequences far beyond a simple disappearance. Together, Lauren and Michael prepared themselves to step into the unfolding crisis. The alliances of Genoa City were shifting once again, and the lines between family loyalty and power were becoming more complicated than ever. But one thing was clear in both of their minds. Whatever darkness had pulled Jack into Patty's grasp, they would not allow the people they cared about to face it alone.